so we want to look at this guy here. So it's one guy, okay, 3 statues of him. And if you've got a pharaoh like this, and he's wearing a kilt, you want to know who he is, you look at his belt. Okay, the belt of his kilt, and you will see on each case he is the same guy. He's got the hands up motif, 3 of them there. So we know without any question that he is Pharaoh Sesostris III, or Sesostris III, or Sesostris III, or several other potential titles. And that's what we also need to remember is pharaohs had lots of names and titles. Usually about 6 by which they were known. A birth name, a royal name, a throne name, a 2 ladies name, which is to do with the 2 different bits of Egypt, and so on and so on. And then, bearing in mind, if you're reading an English Bible, you're reading an English translation of a Greek translation, of a Hebrew translation, of an Egyptian name. So somewhere along the line it all gets a bit scrappy. So that's worth bearing in mind. But we know who he is. I call him Sesostris III, that's his Greek name. It's just the one that sits from the next. He's on the throne in the early 18 to 1900s BC. And that puts him in the time of Joseph in Egypt. So what we do is, from day one's point of view, and I'll share with you some others in the States who do great work on this archaeological stuff, what we do is try and take the Bible data as it's given to us, the time references, and say, okay, does that work in the time that we find in archaeology? So if you do some basic sums, and I'll show you them later on, you will find Joseph's in Egypt about 1900 BC, thereabouts. This is the guy on the throne. So does the Joseph thing work in that context? Well, there's a number of things. I'll tell you just a couple, and I'll point you to someone else in the States who's done some excellent work on this. But first of all, what we know is Sesostris here, at his time, Egypt was just full of lots of tribal communities going about their own business. They had their own chiefs, their own leaders, they grew their own crops, they did their own stuff, and as long as they behaved, Pharaoh would just leave them alone. But suddenly, and without explanation, Sesostris does something that the secular historians really kind of scratch their heads about. Why does he do this? And what he does is, he takes those tribal chiefs off from everywhere in Egypt. He gets rid of them. He deposes them, and then he also takes control, particularly, of how Egypt is doing its agriculture, producing its food. So wait a minute, something's already beginning to ring a bell with me. We've got a pharaoh that suddenly is taking control of agriculture in the whole of Egypt at a certain point in history. Why is that relevant to our Joseph story? You all know this. You don't need to be afraid. It's okay.
It sounds like Joseph.
It sounds like Joseph. Why does it sound like Joseph? Because Joseph has been in prison, and Pharaoh's having dreams about fat cows and thin cows, fat corn, thin corn, years of plenty, years of famine. Joseph comes up to interpret it and says, in the years of plenty, you gather in, you store up, and in the years of famine, you distribute and you sell, and it will make you even more powerful Pharaoh than you are. So immediately, just by taking the Bible data and asking the question, we're in a place that's quite comfortable, actually. We don't need to do too much. A lot of the stuff that you might see, I don't know if you've seen patterns of evidence and stuff like that, if you look at any of this, they all try and shift the timeline of Egypt around. And to be honest, you really can't do that anymore. It's pretty settled within a few years either way. So you can't do that. So what we have to do is say, if the Bible's pointing into a place, does it work? And the answer is it absolutely works. And here's the other thing I'll say about him. He has a tomb in Egypt, and then next to his tomb is the tomb of his right-hand man, his Vizier, his prime minister, whatever you want to call it. The closer you're buried to the king, the more important you are in the king's eyes and life. You're going to be close to him in eternity. And the tomb of his right-hand man, his Vizier, is very interesting. Firstly, there's no body in it. That's fairly normal, sadly, bodies get stolen. But if there was a body in it, it would be a problem for us, because Joseph's body was taken away, wasn't it, and buried back in the land of promise. So there's that, but they don't make anything too much about that. But the key thing is this: there's an inscription in the tomb that is unique in Egyptian history. And in the tomb, we are told, here lies, his name is Egyptian name Sobekimha, but again, he would have lots of titles. Even in Genesis, we get an Egyptian title for Joseph. In the tomb, there's an inscription, and it talks about the Egyptian name. You won't find the name Joseph in Egyptian history, but the person in the tomb is identified as the ruler of all the land. And the linguists and secular historians have a problem with that, because no vizier, no prime minister was ever called the ruler of all the land, because this guy is the ruler not only of the land but of everything, right? So it's a very odd title. Plus, when you then get into Genesis, chapter 40 onwards, when Joseph does his interpretation, the king understands what's going on, makes him his vizier, his right-hand man, he says, apart from me, you will be what? The ruler of all the land. So it really is kind of, that sort of hair on the back of the neck, standing up stuff, okay? There's a guy called Doug Petrovich in the States. He's done a lot of work on this. He's excellent, really solid, and he will give you loads more reasons why we're in a good place here as far as Joseph is concerned. But that title is pretty incredible. The way that it's written is unique in Egyptian history.